Find you 5 of the most undervalued suburbs in Australia for 2026. I went and looked at the 19 largest capital cities and major regional markets throughout the country. And then across these suburbs, looked at over 65,300 data points. To find you these suburbs, this is not only my life's work, but my absolute obsession. And I can truly say that these are 5 of the most undervalued suburbs that you will find anywhere in Australia for this year. Now, the first suburb and market that I wanted to focus on is called Midland over there in WA. Now, Perth is as hot a market as there is in the country right now, with prices, according to Cotality, having gone up 2% in February 2026, and with prices across the city going up by 18.6% in the last year. Now, Midland is a suburb just 16 k's from the CBD of Perth, where the average house price in 2026 is just $701,000. To find this one little hidden gem in Perth, I had to look at over 352 suburbs within 60 k's of Perth. Now, the number one reason I liked it so much was the 10-year data set, where most of Perth in the last 10 years has done between 80 to 200%. This little cracker over that time had just done 55% on average. Now, while it has shown phenomenal growth in the last 5 years, the 10-year data set is showing me something that most investors looking at Perth this year will miss. The other thing I like about the area at the moment is there's a 1.3% vacancy rate, making it chronically undersupplied. Although the key negative of this area is it does have a higher percentage of renters compared to the average suburb in Perth. And if you're a local, it's probably one of the suburbs with the worst reputations based on that higher percentage of renters. That said, pound for pound, it was very difficult for me to see a single suburb in all of Perth that in the 10-year data set was as undervalued as this one right now. Now, I wanted to show you this little cracker that recently sold on the 22nd of December, 2025. Now, this little 3-bed, 1-bathroom home on a slightly smaller 369 square meter piece of land sold for just $662K. Now, looking through the property, it obviously looks extremely well presented from the front, and you can tell that it's obviously been a retiree's or a deceased estate. Now, while this home has been beautifully cared for over the years, there's so much potential for an investor or a homeowner to go in and pick up this property, replace the flooring, the blinds, the light fittings, and give it a bit of a repaint and get it straight online for rental. Longer term on a property like this, you can also see that if you were to clean up the kitchens and bathrooms, it could be worth significantly more on resale 10, 15, 20 years from today. Now, the second suburb I wanted to share today is a suburb called Wyndham, Vale, just 31 kilometers from the CBD of Melbourne in the western side of the city. Now, the average property price, which is absolutely insane to me, is just $617,000 in Wyndham Vale right now. Now, what I love about this suburb and this part of Melbourne right now is the 7-year data is showing that it's significantly below longer term averages right now. Where the Sunshine Coast, Gold Coast, Adelaide, Perth, or parts of Brisbane would have done over 100% growth in the last 7 years, when a suburb like this one is showing just 30% with an incredible long-term history, there is blood in the water for investors like you guys right now. What I love about this part of the city is it's got some great schools, phenomenal main roads, great transport infrastructure in terms of trains, and it also is going to benefit from the $5 billion Western Link project, which is due to kick off and be completed within the next 5 years. On top of this, the average household incomes based on the 2021 census data were already over $1,700 per week, but you add in the inflation today, and incomes in this area would be well over the $100,000 per year per household mark. Now, I wanted to share 2 very, very different examples of the types of homes that you can get in there. The first one, as you can see, is a beautiful 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 3-car garage home on a smaller sub 500 square meter block that was recently built and then sold for just $750,000 in January 2026. Now, as you can see, this property is absolutely immaculate and was built to a beautiful and high standard. Alternatively, the second property that you can see in front of you is on a nice large 600 square meter block, is a little bit older, but is still a beautiful 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2-car garage home, which sold in December for just $680K. Now, looking through the photos, you can see it's still in great condition and you could rent it out immediately, but through replacing the blinds, giving it a little bit of a tidy up in the future and a bit of a paint job, it could look significantly better on resale. Now, what I love about this part of the city is there's incredibly affordable townhouses, really, really nice newer properties like that first one on the smaller blocks, or slightly older properties that are in great condition on those larger blocks. So for below that 750K mark, there are literally 3 incredibly good options depending on your budget. Now, the third market and suburb that I wanted to touch on today is Darwin. Now, Darwin is on an absolute tear at the moment, and the data coming out from Cotality is suggesting that in the last month alone, in February 2026, house prices across Darwin went up by an average of 1.5%. On top of this, Darwin was the top performing market in the country in the last 12 months, having gone up just under 20%, which is phenomenal. Now, why this is happening is for 2 reasons. There is a bit of a surge of infrastructure and jobs going into Darwin at the moment, but the main reason is Darwin has had an absolute shocker over the last 15 years and is one of the last affordable markets in the country. Now, the suburb I wanted to touch base on Darwin is called Karama. This suburb is just 11 k's from the city centre, and according to HTAG, has an average house price of just $586,000 in 2026. In the last 12 months, this suburb has done extremely well, having averaged almost 15% growth. On top of this, the vacancy rates are very low, incomes are extremely high, and that percentage of renters is right in that sweet spot of between 30 and 40% of the market. Now, as you can see, this little 3-bed, 2-bathroom, 2-car garage home just sold on an 873 square meter block in Karama for just $675K in December 2025. Now, as you can see, this property is immaculately looked after and comes with a phenomenally large and beautiful, well-maintained piece of land. Now, while this is an example of probably a higher maintenance property than some investors would like, the fact that it has the monster piece of land is super appealing to me. But this isn't the only type of property in this area, and you can absolutely pick up those bigger 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom brick and tile joints for well below the 750K mark right now. Now, the fourth market and suburb that I wanted to focus on is a suburb called Thomson, which is down there in the major regional market of Geelong, which is just 1 hour southwest of Melbourne CBD. Now, after researching the 20 largest markets in the country, Geelong is the second most undervalued right now. In fact, when I look at the data Australia-wide, it's almost impossible to not like this market right now, regardless of your feelings of Victoria, the land taxes, or the current interest rate environment today. Now, what I love about this suburb is it's right near the beach and right near the city centre, and the average house price is just $536,000. Not only has this suburb not done anything in the last 12 months, but it hasn't really done anything in a meaningful way for the last 7 years. In fact, when I looked at the HTAG data between 2007 and 2025, wider Geelong did over 220% price growth, but in the last 10 years, this suburb has just done 45%. Now, when I see that, like I mentioned before, where the 10-year or 7-year growth rates are so low versus history, I know there's blood in the water and an opportunity, which is why my brother and myself and many of our clients are looking at the Geelong market right now. Now, the only issue that I can see with this market at the moment is there's only a tiny number of sales each year. In fact, over the last 12 months, there was just 37 sales, which means you have to be extremely picky. That said, with the number of people moving into Geelong, how quickly incomes are improving and how quickly prices are going up down there, I can see this area looking extremely different 7 to 10 years from today. Now, the first property I wanted to show is this beautiful 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 4-car garage home, which recently sold for just $755K and is being completely renovated top to bottom. Now, as you can see from these photos, I believe this is a preview of what's to come in the coming years in this area as people do the flooring, repaint, and put in beautiful brand new kitchens like this one. This property would appeal to so many people, selling for just $755K, and for all of those people sliding out of Melbourne because it's either too expensive or because the lifestyle no longer appeals to them, will be sliding straight into properties like this, which I believe should be selling for at least $1.2 million right now. But for me personally, I don't always want to be buying someone else's profit or someone else's beautiful property, and so many of our clients feel the same way, which is why I wanted to show you this little cracker, which, as you can see, is a beautiful 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom home. Again, sold on a nice big 560 plus square meter block for just $600K, literally a stone's throw from the water's edge. Now, as you can see from this property, all it really needs is a bit of a weed and feed out there in the backyard and a bit of a garden tidy up to bring it back to its former glory. Internally though, even at $600K, it's had a beautiful kitchen in, a new paint job, and beautiful new flooring. To put things in perspective, if I was looking at a suburb 40 kilometres from the city of Brisbane, like Morayfield on the northern side, a 600 square metre piece of land without a house on it at all today would be selling for between 650 and 700k for the land alone. Now, the fifth and final suburb or market that I wanted to discuss is another one in the northwestern side of Melbourne. Now, this suburb, which is just under 40k's outside of the Melbourne CBD, has an average house price of just $605,000. In the last 12 months, Harkness has actually had a pretty good year, going up over 7%, which is about 2 to 3% better than Melbourne did over the last 12 months. That said, it's had an absolute shocker over the last 7 years, with prices going up just 33% over a 7-year period versus the 200% that they went up over the last 18 years. Again, incomes are amazing, days on market are coming down, and this area is as hot as anywhere I can see in Australia right now. Now again, like anywhere in Victoria right now where you've got incredible options under the 750k mark, you can either go for that newer place on the slightly smaller block, or you can go for that slightly older place on the much bigger piece of land, depending on your personal investment strategy and philosophy. Now, the first property I wanted to show you is obviously a beautiful 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom home on just under 500 square meters that recently sold in January 2026 for just 655k. Now, this property is phenomenal because the cost of building it right now across Australia would be over 500k, and if you're picking this piece of land up in this position in Perth or Brisbane, you'd be looking at least 600k for the land today. The second example is another property on a beautiful big 705 square meter block. This 3-bedroom brick and tile home sold recently for just 685k. And as you can see, beautiful big block, modern, low maintenance, tenant ready home, the type of property that when you pick it up is not going to give you too many hassles outside of general wear and tear and maintenance over the first 5 years. So they're 5 of my favorite suburbs and markets for 2026. Now, I really tried my absolute best to go and look at the biggest 19 markets in the country and try and find value, but I just found it extremely difficult to find value outside of the Victorian, Perth, Darwin and Brisbane markets for 2026 moving forward. We are now really in a market where there is two very, very different things going on. There are the places that have absolutely cranked in value over the last 7 to 10 years, and there are the places that have massively underperformed over the same period relative to long-term history. My advice for you, if you are thinking like me of buying 1, maybe 2 extremely high quality data-backed properties this year, is to not follow the crowd into the markets that are cranking in the short term and that have gone absolutely ballistic recently, but to really look at the data and make the most educated decision that you can so that you can absolutely clean up. And when everybody turns from the likes of Perth or Brisbane or Darwin over time and finds their way back into the likes of Geelong and Melbourne, you're well poised because you already own property down there before the gold rush begins. So if you're considering buying an investment property in the next 3 to 12 months and you want to use science and data as well as AI to make the best decision possible, then the team and I over here at Pumped on Property would love to offer you a one-on-one strategy session. Simply go to www.pumpedonproperty.com, click that free strategy session button, and we can talk about exactly where you are right now, where you'd like to be longer term. We can talk about the 19 largest markets in the countries and the pros and cons of each. And then you can take that information and go and absolutely crush it on your own, or potentially become one of the extremely small number of clients that we take on each week. But either way, we truly wish you all the best in 2026 on your journey to financial freedom.
It was all a dream.